begin from there. So this is the village that the CBSE people are talking about. So I'll just put up the uh, directive that they have shared. Sorry, not directive, the circular that they have shared. Yeah. So this is the circular that I had mentioned in the as the central focus of the program. This is the circular that CBSE has released recently. Now, one mistake that we keep making is people are studying for the board, people are working so hard for the board. Nobody is supposed to study for the board, nobody is supposed to be working hard for the board. The board themselves are very much concerned about children's education and not their academics. And if you read all the circulars, the affiliation bylaws, all these things, so it would be very clear from there. So, for example, even here, if you read, they are expressing great concern on the well being of the children, the well being of the teachers, the well being of the school, um, things like that. So, yeah. So, if you check the different themes that they are speaking about, one is it takes a village to raise a child, another one is hand, heart, head. Then another topic here is running of a kitchen is an immense learning resource. Upkeep is a course in itself. So we'll be covering all these things over the last few Sundays, along with a few general concepts on what a school should truly be. So we'll come back to the presentation.
त्याचं ते काढून टाक.
काय
ब्लूटूथचं कनेक्शन काढून टाक.
बंद केलं नाही ब्लू
Yeah, here it is. So the phrase "it takes a village to raise a child" comes from a Swahili saying "Asiye funzwa na mamaye hufunzwa na ulime wengu," which means whomsoever is not taught by the mother will be taught with the world. So this is a community thing in most African villages, and that was the natural sense of living in most villages before things got modernized, so to speak. So at that time, whenever a child has to learn, the child learns very naturally, and the child doesn't learn through studying. They learn by doing and interacting and being around the village. So now let's take a look at the directive once again. So the general sense of this circular that CBSE has forwarded the principals is now we have to leverage certain untapped resources. Now that there's a lockdown, um, it's a few people think that it is very daunting, it is very stressful, but in fact, it is kind of a blessing in terms of education for the children. And this is in the case of the teachers as well as parents. Um, and the CBSE people have been trying to tell us this, trying to help us out, but we often fail to understand this concept. And ultimately, it all depends on our understanding of the how we can do the make the best out of the situation. So, like they have said, certain untapped resources. So, in general schooling, we miss out on normal things. We miss out on the learning that can be extracted from just maybe cleaning your room or from cooking your food. So, things like that, or gardening. So then they have asked, can the home be engaged by school for some lateral solutions? What can you do so that the children can make the best out of where they are and how they are, instead of now trying to hunt for stationery shops where, okay, now interestingly, even the stationery shops have been put into non-essential things. You understand how this works? So you don't really need stationery for learning. There's so much of stuff going around that you can learn from a lot of different things. So another point that they raise is integrating education with art, music, cinema, quizzes, gardening, informal setups, and so on. So now again, this is not just for parents, this is for parents as well as teachers. Even if you're taking online classes, depend less on electronic resources, on e-learning kits, and try to depend more on the things that the children see around them. Because the e-learning kits help you till the time the screen is on. Once the screen is off, once again the child is in the natural environment and they lose out. Let's keep it that way. They lose out on the learning that they could have had uh, from the things that are around them. And the CBSE has also given the examples of what these things are. So, what can the teachers do? So, you can give them activity-based worksheets, projects that can be done at home, and things that generate a flood of curiosity. So, this is something that is very central in our school, and it is something that should be central in education, anyways. That is generating curiosity. Now, if now the current way education is being done or academics is being conducted is every time a child has a question, you try to give them the answer. That is the most harmful thing. If you give them the answer, then they don't learn to find it out. So you have to ask them leading questions. You have to show them the path, and they have to walk it. Now, what this does is instead of the normal thing where they just feel satiated by the answer you give them, now you're actually hunting for answers. So, so then we come to the next point, that is integrated learning modules. Now, integrated learning modules, yes, it is mostly to do with teachers, but it you even parents can use it. Have you heard of DIY kits? Do it yourself. So DIY kits are projects that can be made, and the children have to uh, make it, build it, and sort it out basically. So if you can make DIY kits at home and you get children to try it out, so that is one way. It requires a lot of critical thinking. It requires a lot of collaboration, understanding, sometimes maths, physics, chemistry, biology, everything together. Then, as far as the schools are concerned, the CBSE says, okay, you should try to engage your teachers and build their capacities so that they become more creative and they think more creatively. So here they make a very interesting closing statement. The sky is the limit. So uh, there is absolutely nothing that should limit you. And this is an official CBSE circular. So now at least schools can think of transforming themselves. So we'll move on to how, like a few examples, what can be done here. So in the next few moments, we'll be covering these topics: what makes up a village, significance of villages, rules, and a few of the learning resources. Yeah. So the village is made up of a lot of different factors, a lot of different people, and things. Can you contribute to something that is probably not in this list? I'm very sure I may have missed out a few things here and there. So you can just put in your responses in the chat box as and when you get them. And yeah, if you have any questions also, you can put them up in the chat box at any time. So the village is made up of, obviously, we'll go from let's say near to far, which is one of the concepts of integral education. So your parents, who are the people in your house, then you have the relatives who live around you, then you have your neighbors who live beside you, and you have the other villages who you see on your daily rounds. You have barbers, you have farmers, you have doctors, you have different people who manage the village, that is the Panch, Pradhan, Sarpanch, the different governing ways of various villages. Then you have other parts of the village who uh, you naturally build a sense of curiosity among children. That is, yes, okay, one very important part. So somebody mentioned water bodies, that is ponds, lakes, common wells. Yes, these are also very engaging resources and a big part of villages. So these things naturally draw the curiosity of children when they see a barber walking by and with scissors and the typical case of a barber, and they'll obviously be curious. Okay, okay, fine, he cuts hair here, but then what does he do later on? Where does the hair go? Things like that. Banyan trees for meetings, yes. So there are so many things that are in the village where learning happens very naturally. One thing that usually happens in farms. So the children start going to the farms very early on, and obviously to play first, and then they grow curious on what the parents are doing, what the brother is doing, things like that, and they try to imitate, which is a natural tendency of children. And they gradually also are very good in estimations. So imagine learning a very powerful mathematical skill at such an early age. If you are able to just look at a farm and you are able to tell the area of that farm. If you are able to look at a tree and say how far the tree is from you just by looking at it. So this gives a lot of clarity, not just in thought, it gives a lot of clarity even in the way the mind works and the way the learning happens. You also have the maidans, the play fields. You have the chalks where people gather and gossip and talk. Um, then you have their secret games, things that they don't want to reveal to the parents. They don't want to reveal to the to people outside that group. Sometimes they have these secret groups, secret meetings where they leave out a bunch of their own friends and so on, because that is how they play. Yes, approximation. Sacred grove, yes. So, yeah, so a few villages also have areas where children or people are not supposed to go normally, at least not to play. So, sacred groves refer to that, where you can't go and eat food, you can't, so you go there just to be, just to spend some time. Yes, we have a school. Okay, I left out school in villages. Okay. So yeah, you have teachers, you have schools, uh, you have countless learning resources. Now, the rules of a village. So, this is a very interesting story that had been doing its rounds on Facebook and WhatsApp for quite some time. So, an anthropologist goes there. Anthropologist is someone who studies human beings and the human relations. So he goes to Africa, and in one particular village, he is just playing around with some children, and he places a basket of candies near a tree, and he tells the children, whoever gets there first will get all the candy. So he is expecting a race. So people will go, and one person will win the candies, and let's see what happens. To his surprise, what happens is all the children hold their hands together and they run to the candy together, and they enjoy the candies together. So then the anthropologist he asks one of the people who he thinks would have won it, why did you do this? As in, why didn't you just go for the candy and get all of it for yourself? So his response is, that will make me happy, but it won't make anybody else happy. They will feel sad that they couldn't win the candy. If one person is sad, then how can everybody else be happy? So this concept, they called it Ubuntu. Ubuntu. So Ubuntu means, okay. So in the next statement, I have given a brief idea of what is to help you understand the best sense of it. So Archbishop Desmond Tutu is one very famous figure from Africa, and he says, "I am what I am because of who we all are." This is the general sense of Ubuntu. So it is the essence of being human. You can't exist as a human being in isolation. You cannot alone be human. You have to be human with respect to everything that is around you and everyone that is around you. It speaks about our interconnectedness, and when you have this quality, Ubuntu, you are known for your generosity. So everybody knows that you are generous. We think of ourselves far too frequently as just individuals, separated from one another, whereas you are connected and what you do affects the whole world. So what action we take and whatever action we ignore or do not take, both of them affect humanity. Whatever you do as well as what you don't do. When you do well, it spreads out. It is for the whole of humanity. So, uh, whatever positivity you share with the world is the positivity that will actually be shared with the world. It will actually spread around to different corners that you can't even probably think of. So, this is a central concept in most archetypic villages. Yes, interrelatedness. So interrelatedness, here he's mostly talking about human beings, but it is related to everything, as in the plants, animals, the place, the general earth itself, and the sun, moon, sky, the understanding of all these things, everything. Other than that, a few central rules that are there. Uh, First of all, everything in the village, everything that happens in the village is through responsibility, is not through lessons. Nobody teaches you things. Things are just learned spontaneously. So, for example, you do not have to like your children to love them. Now, we often try to understand where did this whole concept of hitting children come in? Why do parents hit the children and all that? Because at that time hitting was spontaneous but love was also spontaneous. So uh, wherever things went bad, wherever things went out of bounds or out of the rules, uh, there was a corrective measure, and once things got back into the corrected system, then again there was love all around. So you do not have to like your children to love them. Means in today's world, you can talk about it in this sense that when you know that something that the child is asking is unreasonable. So we'll come to the next topic also, which is related to this, um, which is unreasonable. Your solution shouldn't be that okay, let him do something good and then let's give him that. So that is not how love works. So if something is wrong, something is wrong. And there has to be a good amount of brainstorming on it and a discussion on it. And you have to come to a conclusion together. So just because your child wants something, that doesn't mean you give it to them. That is not love. That is just engaging them in their weaknesses. The next point, loss of executive control. Now, executive control suddenly has picked up nowadays because people are noticing that children stick to the digital screen and they lose focus, and there's a lot of violence going around. US is facing a lot of gun violence. You must have heard where children go to schools and they just start shooting, and when they then if they don't shoot themselves, then a psychologist, a counselor talks to them what happened exactly. They try to understand where things went wrong so that something like that doesn't ever happen again. And in most scenarios, it was found that a lot of these children uh, don't have a sense of reality. They are not in touch with reality around them. So executive control is when you are able to control your emotions, when you are able to control, when you are basically not carried away by your emotions and by uh, just your random thinking patterns, the instinctive thinking patterns. So, how do you establish executive control? You make it clear that you do not entertain blackmailers. Often, children have this response that if they don't get something that they want, they start banging their feet, they'll start breaking things, they'll hold their breath till they go blue. So, yeah, so if that is the case, then you make sure that you don't give in, and this is hard on people just for the first few times. It gets harder if you give in the first time. So the first time, if you have let the child have, okay, yeah, okay, is it better now? All right. So yes, collaborative choice making. Uh, So yeah, in case of blackmailing, throwing tantrums, it's all one-sided, and if they are made to understand their role, and they are made to understand how uh, how things work, how systems work. So that is where importance of play comes in. So if you let the children play a lot amongst themselves, they realize, okay, if we play and if someone probably while playing hits someone else and that person starts crying, and then the whole game is distracted and everybody is trying to console the person who is crying. So just because of one person's fault, the game has been disturbed. Then again, if somebody tries to cheat, so if a few people are just saying, okay, no, we made 5 runs, no, we made 3 runs, no, we made 5 runs. So if this fight is happening, they realize, okay, again, if we have a limited time to play, so we are basically losing out on that time just because of the arguing. So over a period of time, they learn that these things waste time. They learn that if we make somebody else cry, how do we feel? If we cry and we make somebody else cry, how do they feel? So empathy. So all these things are learned when there is play. Then, what is most important during executive control related interactions? Once they have given up the tantrum, once they have forsaken that thing that they'll sit grumpily on one side or things like that, you treat them with the same love and respect that you had for them before the tantrums began. So this part is very important. Often, what happens is when we get angry because of their tantrums, then we lose focus, and when they have cooled down, we are still angry. So it's very important that we maintain our cool at this time and get back to them, get back normally to them, and stop uh, losing our executive control over this. Then another point that is very important in villages, there are no rewards and there are no punishments. The punishments are the consequences that take place. The rewards are the consequences that take place. There's nobody who gives you a chocolate if you win a race or if you do your work properly. It's your work. You have to do it properly. It's your bed. If you don't make it, then it will be messy and then it will be dirty and then probably you will fall sick. It's your food. If you play around with it, it will get cold and then you will have to eat cold food. If you don't eat the food, your body will be weak. You won't be able to play. You will get tired very quickly. So everything is through consequences. The same thing the other way around. If you eat properly, if you eat healthy food, if you make your bed, you get the price for it. If today you decide, okay, yes, every morning you will wake up at 5 o'clock, or that over a period of time will help you have a longer day. It will help you have more number of hours in the day. You can play, you can sleep, you can uh, just roam around, you can look at trees, you can look at animals, whatever you want to do, whatever you are interested in. You can help your parents with the farming, things like that. So there are no rewards and punishments in a natural sense of learning and in archetype responsibilities. Yes, self responsibility. So the last one is neutrality and healing. So a lot of times what happens is we tend to overact or react to certain situations because it the social perception gives us a panicky outcome. Like if you think about a situation where a child, you go to say a relative's place and the child picks up something, keeps it in the pocket, and comes home with you. Now you don't know this, and what the child has done is essentially stealing, but the child doesn't understand that. You understand that and you get panicky because you don't know what you are going to have to face when that person realizes something is missing and then you tell that person "Okay, my child stole it." So that social perception gives you push you more into panic than the rational thinking behind it. Now think of it from the child's perspective. The child doesn't know it is wrong because the child doesn't understand the concept of possessions. The child doesn't understand that you can own something. The child doesn't understand that something owned by somebody cannot be taken by somebody else because it is wrong. But sometimes we have to offer some rewards to see that the child does his best, isn't it? Okay. If you reward the child, is the child doing the best or is the child doing something to gain that reward? So the child will work only as hard as it is needed to get the reward. The child doesn't work harder. And okay, so this is a little bit of this is related to brain chemistry. So the reward system is based on something called dopamine. In the consecutive Sunday sessions, we'll probably talk about it in more detail. But the basic concept is that there is a chemical in your brain that helps you decide directions. It helps you decide what is a reward and what is not. So if happiness, general happiness is a reward, and if you divert it, if instead of that you have something external that is a reward, so your brain starts developing that chemistry, it starts developing that structure or learning structure where now reward translates into that object, that trophy, that medal. So now the importance has moved away from the task, it has moved away from the efforts and the sense of achievement in doing that thing, and is now stuck with that object. So now the child is not doing that thing because it must be done or because it is the right thing to do. The child is doing it because they'll get a reward out of it. Now the same thing, if you extrapolate it to a child who is grown up, now the child is working in a company. So now in a company, there are incentives, but you don't get rewards for doing things on a day-to-day basis. Nobody will pat your back if you have done a good job in one day. And somewhere over time, the child will start feeling, okay, no matter how hard I work, it's not enough in this company. So then the child is dissatisfied very easily. So it has a major effect later on. The impact is seen later on. So giving them things as rewards is not a really good way to go about it. And if you are stuck in this system, it's very difficult to get out, but it's not impossible. And there are many different ways to do so. Which again, as I mentioned, we'll discuss in one of the following Sunday sessions. So now coming to neutrality and healing. Um, Bad things happen with everyone. There is always some amount of stress related to a few things. There is always some tension because of a few things, especially in villages. If you have a storm, you don't know what is going to happen. You don't know whether your house will be in order or not after the storm. You don't know whether your crops will be in order. So your livelihood gets disturbed. So yes, there's always a lot of that. Okay, thank you. So yeah, okay. There's one more question. What we can do instead of punishments to make child realize that he has done something wrong? Okay. Yes. So that actually depends on a few factors. One is, are you sure? Are you very sure that it is wrong? Whatever the child has done. If you look at it from the child's point of view, maybe it is not wrong. So here the question is different. The question should be, how will the child learn that something like this is not socially acceptable? So the whole concept of wrong is different for the child. So that is the first thing. And then yes, if it is something the child knows is not socially acceptable, then how do we work on it? So in correction behavior, it has to be in terms of responsibility. Okay, look, I am doing my responsibility. I am giving you food. I am managing the house, and it is your somebody else's responsibility to maybe go out on a living. It is your responsibility to do at least the stuff that you are responsible for. So if you do not do that, then you do not have the um, charity to take my responsibility for free. So, for example, a very normal situation, if a child just refuses to set up a table, which is something a child can very easily do, then there'll be no food on the table. Who will put the food on the table? If we had agreed that the food you have to distribute the plates and then I will be serving the food. So if you have not done your part, I cannot do my part. So it's all a consecutive pattern of responsibility. So if the child is made to understand from that point of view, it will generally help matters. And one very important thing in this is you have to have a very strong sense of discipline inwards yourself. If you ask the child not to use bad words, you have to ensure that there are no bad words in your entire family, not just in your mouth or in your head. You have to ensure that nobody else is using bad language in the house. So that kind of discipline. Then, if you expect the children to wake up early, you have to ensure that you are so self-disciplined that your entire routine is set up, and the child is able to see it visually. Okay, okay, yes, this is the routine that my parents are following. Why not make my own routine also? So, it's things like that the children pick up. So, as I was saying about any calamities, any problems, so neutrality and healing are a very major factor. So, yes, role modeling. Thank you. So, this carrying forward of discipline from person to person is called role modeling, and children do it a lot. So, in case of neutrality, when you want to correct a child, now this is related to the same thing. You have to ensure that when you ask the child, if the child has hit someone, so when you are asking the child, you don't ask the child, why did you do the wrong thing? You have to ask the child, why did you do it? Do not give the sense to the child that what they have done is wrong. They have to understand that it was something that is destructive through a process of thought, not just as a final lesson. So when you ask the child, your tone has to be very neutral, not like why did you do this? So there is a difference between asking it like that and asking, okay, what happened? What made you do it? So there is a very different sense of tone and very different language. So gradually the child will confide, gradually the child will understand what the child himself or herself is feeling. Because till quite an age, the child doesn't even realize that they are angry. You won't hear them say, okay, I hit someone because I was angry. You will always hear them say, I hit him because he hit me first. So you have to approach these questions very neutrally and you have to try to figure out with them. And now, once everything is over, there has to be a process of healing because you have to understand that the children have a very strong sense of ethics. The children understand when they have done something wrong. So they are feeling as much hurt inside as probably more than what you are making them feel. If you make them feel bad, what you have done is wrong, they are probably feeling worse when they are actually doing it or when they are actually feeling it. So there has to be a certain kind of healing. You have to let there be some kind of bonding, there be some kind of maybe a hug, maybe a little bit of talking and discussion on something related, but not somewhere where they are put on the stand, things like that. So this neutrality, this healing is there in villages a lot through conversation, through collaboration, through nature, through different duties. A lot of these things are there. Okay, so now that we have spoken so much about all this, there's also another kind of learning, the kind of learning that we term as academics in the village. So everything that is going on in the village, if it is noted down, it becomes academics. It's as simple as that. If you're learning a skill, if you put it into procedure, if you put it as a method, then it is academics. So the different life skills, that is the cooking, cleaning, then making something, breaking something, building, farming, all these things come under life skills. You learn of a lot, construction, you learn a lot of this because all this is constantly going on in the village. And most of these things require more than one person. And the moment you have more than one person, you have a lot of collaboration, you have a lot of communication, and you have shared responsibility. And because of this, you also have dignity of labor because everybody is doing everything. So you don't have any segregation. Ke, no, I can't do construction. That is a mazdoor ka kaam or something like that. There is no separation. Ke, I can't do cleaning because the cleaners are of a lower caste or something like that. All this came much later in the archetype villages. All this was not there. So there was dignity of labor, there was communication, collaboration, life skills and responsibilities, social sciences. So most of the families in villages were joint families. So you had grandparents talking about traditions, talking about stories and generations of history with the children, grandchildren. So when they grow up, they have so much of knowledge within. So there are people who have a lot of medicinal knowledge. There are a lot of people who know a lot about animals and birds. It happened actually quite recently that there's a village close to Amravati, which is where our school is. Uh, there, the villagers knew where certain species of birds would migrate, and for them, that is how the seasons occur. They know okay, it is time to maybe plant your seeds or whatever because this particular bird has migrated and so it is time for the rain. So they find it quite funny that people are chasing the migration patterns and coming from all over the world just to take a few pictures of these birds because you don't find them everywhere. So all these things are naturally ingrained in people. Then the other thing, uh, like the approximation part that was discussed earlier, mathematics is developed very well because of acute sense of everything that needs to be done properly. So, for example, if you are farming during the farms during the sowing part, you cannot just randomly put seeds here and there because that is not going to give you a good output. If you want a good output, it has to be organized properly, and there has to be a perfect density of seeds that is being sown in that entire furrow, in that entire line. So that approximation is needed, and that tallied with the amount of grain that is left will give you a good sense of addition, subtraction, division between the furrows and things like that. So all this happens very normally. So then if a little bit is left, you know, okay, you have probably sown lesser. If you have sown too much, so then you know, okay, things went empty quicker than they were supposed to. So mathematics is learned very naturally. Physics, there is physics in everything. All the tools that you use, if you are say digging, if you are using a well, you can't use a well with an unbalanced bucket. You can't, if you pull too hard, there is a chance that your string will due to friction and heating, it will probably get burned. So all these things are there and they are learned very naturally. Um, Learning from nature, of course, there's a lot to learn from nature. As somebody mentioned, water bodies and all that. Water bodies teach us a lot. The way life survives inside the water, there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of harmony that is involved. Because if that doesn't happen, then the water becomes murky and a lot of disease, insects, and foul smell, all these things are developed. If your lake does not have foul smell, that means your lake has a very good ecosystem. There is a lot of harmony in that water. So there are plants growing, there are insects and fishes that are eating those plants, and they are probably making the water dirty. And that dirt is then consumed by other microorganisms, which probably die off and then help the plant grow. So there's a very good cycle that is developed within the water. So there's another question. Are emotional attributes usually common among children, or they vary? Okay. Um, so the concept of executive control is obviously universal because that is more related to consciousness. But emotional attributes are very different person to person. So there are people who may innately be irritable. There are people who may be innately very patient, but there is a difference, there is a slight change of words. Irritability is related to sensitivity. So if a child is very irritable, it probably means that the child is very sensitive. So then you have to work with the child considering that the child has a very high sensitivity. If the child is very patient, it means the child is probably either very intellectual, like of the thinking type, or there is a chance that the child is more of an observative kind, like the child just likes to see things, likes to hear things, observe things. So very perceptive. So these natural senses are there. Emotions are kind of a side effect of it. It is indicated by the emotions. That is probably the right word for it. So does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay. So then besides this, if you notice, villages have chalks, they have different places, benches here and there. They have a lot of areas where people just while away their time. They don't do anything. They just sit. They either talk, sometimes they don't even talk. So that is actually a very important time, and that is actually a very important factor in children's learning, because children are very peaceful at that time, and they are open to the learning from within. That is the time when the children learn to be mindful. That is the time when creativity is taking place and a lot of critical thinking is happening. So this knowledge is removed and absent from the general way lifestyle happens in a city, because children are just not allowed to sit empty. They are not given that opportunity to do nothing, and that is probably the biggest loss that they have, and a very big contributory factor to a loss in patience and a loss in foresight, a loss in projection. So all these things are absent. Now the losses that I'm mentioning are only things that are immediately perceptible. Now, if you think about these things from a future point of view, this is going to be a loss in family. This is going to lead to a loss in a futuristic thinking where you are more mindful about what could happen because of your behavior, because of your changes, because of your actions. Um, and it also brings in the importance of awareness. So even tiny things that you do or don't do matter. One very simple thing, if you go to a market, if you go to a shop, and the things that you buy, you have no idea how heavily they impact the world. If you, I'll just give you an example of, say, Nestle. So Nestle is one company which is a part of, it has a lot of sub brands under it. It has Maggie, it has Kit Kat, it has all these things under it. And I won't be telling you here that is for you to do your homework and research. You can just search for the search for deforestation and Nestle. That's it. You will come to know the story behind it. Similarly, if you search for if you are picking up things like Vaseline and Lux and Sunsilk and all these things. So most of these come under HUL, that is Hindustan Unilever. This is probably one of the biggest trick by that company. Hindustan Unilever has got nothing to do with Hindustan. It is an American company. So just check the actions of Unilever, how they are dealing with animal testing and everything, and then you will find out what is the history behind it. So, small things like that, things which we are not aware of, can have a very big impact. So, this is something that they learn from being bored. So, let children get bored. So, I'll just take this to what you can do as teachers and as children, sorry, as parents for the children. So, these are various activities that can be done with them. And more or less what they inculcate. So, invite local talent would be if you have certain events in your school where children get to see how a mason works, they get to see how a plumber works, an electrician works. So, they get to learn firsthand how these things are done. Then, one thing that a lot of schools do, they are always very mindful about hiding away the brooms and the tools and everything. Uh, that is actually very destructive for children, because for children, uh, the way they view it is they come to school and they go out of school, and then when they come back the next morning, the school is magically clean. All the garbage that they have probably thrown around in the class disappears the next day, and they don't see the process, they don't see that happening, they don't understand how it is happening. So how can we expect them to have some kind of gratitude for the people who are working there? So all these tools and things should be kept in visibility. The broom and the mop and everything should be kept organized, clean, but in a place where it is seen. So and you can also, like, if your school allows you, you can probably take it a step further and make it a rule that if things get dirty or if things get messy after the normal cleaning time by the janitorial staff, it has to be done by the children, or it has to be done by the people responsible for it. So if you implement some rules like that, so then it gives a lot of dignity for labor for the staff in the school. Then study and record the history and culture of the locals and the city or area through interviews, through city libraries. So a lot of this is a lot of resources are there which are untapped. So if you speak to the people around you, yeah, I'll give you the presentation, and this video also I'll see if I can upload it on YouTube. Normally we use Zoom, but this is WebEx, so I'm not very sure how the video works. So let's see. I'll try to upload that too. Um, so yeah, so talk to your neighbors, find out since when they have settled here, where were they from. So you get a good sense of geography, because if they have been traveling, if they have migrated from some place, so you know how many kilometers they have traveled and why. And why here? Why not somebody else, somewhere else? So writing about this will create history, and it can be monitored and maintained as records. So that is one way to learn history. Begin with history. Then you have learning from things. Yes, as I mentioned, previously about plumbing and electricity and everything, if it is done consciously and with the respective knowledge, so in that case, you can again, if you note it down, so you learn the physics behind it, the maths behind it, and with the building, you can do a lot of studies. You can ask them to find out the area of your classrooms. You can ask them to figure out how many people would normally fit in this class. If we remove the desks and benches, what activities can you do in the class? Can you play cricket here? Yes or no? Can you play football here? Yes or no? Things like that. It helps a lot. Then you have garage days. Garage days are when you take out the trash. So you have a lot of things that are just lying around in the campus, maybe like a broken tube light and regulator and a tape recorder, or maybe just some broken bench or something like that. Let it all come together and let children figure out what is there and whether they can fix it, whether they can, what can they do with it, what is inside it, how does it work, if it is spoiled, why is it spoiled, can it be repaired. So all these things, this can be explored during the garage days. Then you have cooking. So cooking has a lot of chemistry. So if children understand the role of proteins and fat and carbohydrates, that is a whole bunch of chemistry just related to cooking. Other than that, there is a lot of recently a drain in one of our campuses got clogged. So we called the children, we showed them how Drainix works. So you put a little bit of Drainix and then you close the door, and then when you come back, it's clean. So why? What does it have? What happens at that time? So that also has a lot of chemistry behind it. So your normal life itself has a lot of chemistry. Then, along with that, what they learn is not something fictional. It's not something that is just words. It is real, it is hardcore, and it is something that they are able to see every day and every moment. So, something that is being evaluated that regularly doesn't actually need evaluation. So, naturally, the children revise all this every time this is seen. Like once a child learns how to make a roti and the physics behind it, every time the child sees the roti, the physics gets revised behind it. So that is the power of natural sense of learning. Now, conservation studies are very important, as we are saying the current tragedy that the world is entering because of the loss of nature. Even the current crisis that we are facing about corona is more or less related to loss of nature, because the wall between humans and animals has become so thin that an animal like a bat. So, for the people who don't know, it is said that the coronavirus has traveled from bats to humans. So previously it would attack bats, but it wouldn't be that like symptomatic. And now that it comes to humans, it has transformed and become very violent and become as we see it today. So this has happened because of the barrier between human beings and animals, rest of the animals. That barrier has decreased. So even an animal like bat, a bat who we probably wouldn't even think about, being around us, because they are naturally creatures of the forest, naturally creatures of the skies, and they are quite shy that way. How do they come in contact with humans? How is it possible? So this is only because that barrier has become thin. So conservation studies are very important, and for children to understand the impact of animal conservation, plant conservation, um, is also very important, because then they realize the ecosystem, the balance in the ecosystem. So this harmony is very well understood through these activities. Then you have organic farming. Traditional farming has a lot of, so if they are shown the contrast between both of them. So traditional farming has a lot of pesticides, it has a lot of things that are generally very harmful. So these things, how are they getting solved in organic farming? Why did our ancestors use organic farming before? And why did we lose our path in the middle? And then now, why are we coming back to it? This whole thing has a lot of history. It has a lot of true value education and a lot of empathy and gratitude, because you have to, in case of conservation, you have to have a lot of empathy. In case of even crops, when you realize that a certain grain is not supposed to normally produce, that much of yield, like a crop is not supposed to produce that much of grain or that much of yield, so then why are we going back to it? So that requires a lot of empathy to understand, and also gratitude, because these things grow because they grow. It's not because it's not something that we manufacture. So there is a kind of a harmony, there is a kind of a balance involved here, and we must have gratitude for it, because something has a purpose because of which we are here, and we also have a purpose because of which something else will be here. Mini forest concept to be introduced in a big way. Sacred groves, yes. Sacred groves in schools are very important, because you get to have a local ecosystem in your school. So thank you very much for raising that point. Um, Having sacred groves in school is a kind of a blessing that a school can give its children, because you have a space at least for your children to uh, be mindful in, to learn whatever comes out from within in that area, and also develop a lot of respect for that knowledge, for the that premises, that area. Yes, very powerful point. 3 cents of land is enough for 300 trees. Okay, I don't understand cents. Is it a unit of area? Okay. So yes, so somebody has contributed this piece of knowledge that 3 cents of land is enough for 300 trees. Um, so yeah, trees don't require as much of land as you think. But if you have them around, you get a lot more than um you expect. So get more, not in terms of the materialistic things, but in terms of learning, in terms of things that you can do for your child, for your children. So one more thing that can be done, okay, 100 cents is an acre. So one more thing that can be done for developing peace among the children is something called peace corps. So if you have say peace meets, or if you have a few people who serve as peace in charges, so every time there is a fight, then the teacher doesn't intervene, say sorry to him, say sorry to him, give a hug to each other, and then now you are okay to go. That is probably the most artificial and the most destructive way of dealing with conflict. You ask the children to sort it out amongst themselves and be outside it. Be an observer, but don't interfere anywhere. If you have already made peace and charges, um, it is it is a step towards natural conflict resolution. I wouldn't say it's a very good way to solve it, but it's a good step in that direction. So peace corps means people who recognize conflict in the campus, and when they do recognize the conflict, they'll obviously first cool down the situation, and then call a meeting with the children, where the children can now discuss what happened, why did it happen, and now what to do about it. So this is done with the same kind of neutrality that I mentioned before, and Yeah, so then that helps the children understand conflict resolution very well. Then the sacred groves are very useful for this. Just be. So just be, as in, as I mentioned, the purpose of the chalks and these parts in the villages, you can just be in the village and do nothing physically, and very like visually you are probably doing nothing, but internally there's a lot going on, and that development, that growth requires you to do nothing, and it happens best and it happens very well if you are sitting in, say, a sacred grove in among trees in nature, because the brain has a very interesting way of working. It connects the dots that are there in nature when you stop pushing it not to. So naturally, we are meant to learn, but because of the schooling system, we develop this mentality that a classroom is where you are meant to learn, and everything outside is not for learning. So that pattern is broken if you have a few moments in in a sacred grove or things like that. Then other parts from learning from within, best out of waste is a very good way to develop creativity. It's also a very good way to understand recycling. And one very important point is you first of all start understanding how much of waste we are generating per day or per week or whatever. Then no rewards, no punishments, we have already covered. So these are the things that can be done in any school at any point of time. Uh, then the last point, this is something that if you do get time, do check out our YouTube page. We have very elaborate annual days, and they serve as a learning experience for more than 6 to 8 months. So our annual day topic, like for the last annual day topic, for the last annual day, the topic was decided in April 2018. The annual day was done in February 2019. Uh, the annual day that happened in 2020, that is this year, the topic was decided in again around the same time, say May 2019 or something. So the topics are decided almost 1 year in advance, and then we start introducing elements here and there. So I'll just give a quick example of one of the topics, the Sanskrit drama that we did on Chanakya. So we already have Sanskrit as a language since the children are young. But what is important, what is more important is since we had taken up a topic called Chanakya, we had the elections coming up. So we had that was one of the influencing factors. We knew that the elections are going to come up the next year. So we had taken up the topic of Chanakya. So since around 6 to 8 months before the annual day, children have started reading Chanakya Niti. Chanakya Niti is a set of rules, guidelines by Chanakya in first in Sanskrit, and nowadays it is translated in Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, English, everything. So we had a book where it was in Sanskrit and also in English. So we started doing these through discussions. We asked the children, what does it mean to be an ideal citizen? We asked them, what does it mean to be an ideal parent, an ideal child? These discussions were done, and then we read out the Sanskrit part of it, and then they understood a lot of. They got a lot of understanding of politics. They got a lot of understanding of social structure, and then we started doing the play. Now, during the drama, if you know, the period of Chanakya is somewhere around 400 BC. So during that time, uh, we had no idea what people wore. We didn't have any idea on what buildings look like, what structures look like. So we make all our sets and all theater equipment in house, like by the children, parents, and teachers. So we have to first study all that. So when in the beginning we had thought that the Raja will have to have a crown, and the king who insults Chanakya, we thought he might need a crown. So we came to know that at that time they didn't have gold crowns, they didn't have very fancy things. Most of it was made out of mud and wood. There was no cement, and sorry, there was no concrete. There was cement, but there was no concrete. So cement was through lime. So the walls also looked differently. So all this we had to research, and then we painted the wall. So the wall had to be made according to that. When we gave the order for the costumes, some of the costumes we made in house, and some of them we gave an order. Uh, so we had to explain them the requirements. So a lot of this research was involved. There was a big discussion about whether to wear footwear or not, because we came to know that most of the people in that time didn't have footwear. We didn't wear footwear. Even people like kings and princes, that most of the times they would roam around without footwear. So yeah, all this was a journey of discovery for us. So annual days are big learning events. So if you take annual days that seriously, then it's a golden opportunity. So yeah, there's one more point which has come up: vermicompost pit to be made compulsory. Yes. So I think, and it has come out come out from the Supreme Court. It has come out from the Education Minister. A lot of people have said this. Schools need farms. All schools should develop their own farms. They should have their own agriculture setup, and most of them have mentioned, if possible, make it organic. But I think if it is not organic, it is pointless. It has to be organic, and there should be a lot of efforts in doing everything in house. Make the fertilizer in house, as somebody mentioned. Even the Um, vermicompost pits should be in-house, because schools do generate a lot of waste. Let children bring fruit. Let children put this fruit in the vermicompost. This will help in the agriculture. Then rainwater harvesting and solar panels. I am not very sure about solar panels, but rainwater harvesting now has been made compulsory, at least in schools and commercial buildings and apartments. So I don't know about specific states, but most of the states have this as compulsory. Solar panels also is a very good idea for buildings to be green. Solar panels is actually a kind of a double-edged sword, because most of the solar panels that we get nowadays are glass-based. Non-glass solar panels are coming up, but they are not that common yet. So glass-based solar panels involve a lot of sand mining, illegal sand mining. So that is even I have not done too much of research on it. I'll suggest that whenever you go for solar panels, just do your own research. Uh, you have a lot of suggestions coming in the chat, so if everyone can take a look there, uh, maybe you will find something of help. Okay, so that is what I had to share with everyone. Now I can keep things open for questions in the chat box or vocally. I have muted everyone, but you can unmute yourself and ask the question, and then somebody else can continue. So yeah, that winds up the topic. And if you have any further questions, You can either ask them now or you can mail them to me. So we have Shiv Kumar also with us, who is actively involved in spreading the idea of integral education, which is Sri Aurobindo's uh, philosophy, and he is one of the mentors for our school.
Am I audible?
Yes.
I'm so glad for the online session because of first its practicality and also bringing together various viewpoints as well as various types of approaches together in one single place. Because finally there are children, and then we are left with the responsibility of helping the children to grow in the best possible way. All boils down to that. And this means that we have to understand the psychology of children, and that cannot happen unless and until we have a grasp of our own psychology. So all the practices which we are put in, we have to be a little careful not to blindly apply, because each one will have to be first internalized, and out of that and out of our understanding of children, it has to naturally flow. I'm glad Hardik has put everything in perspective without telling that this is the only way or this is the best way, because each one has got their own fluidity, and the human dynamism is so wonderful. I tell you, more than the children, it is an opportunity for us to learn and grow. And in our learning and growth is the joy. So the first and foremost, if we feel that joy, we can help the children to feel this joy also. And finally, it comes to that. As mother said, well, a child should blossom as a sunflower blossoms under the sun in a joyous atmosphere. So that is our responsibility. And thank you so much, Hardik. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you.
And feel free to ask the questions, because he has done all the research and also because he's bringing things together. Sometimes a question will bring out more from the person who has brought it, because one doesn't get opportunity to present everything, because that will be an overdump of everything. So when the question comes, the contextualization and the relevance also comes to apply. And definitely, if I get a chance, probably I will get in touch with you whenever it happens. Little overloaded now, but I wish everybody that to stay at home, feel safe. But thank you for this session, and also thanks to the technology which has opened up another channel of communication.
Yeah.
And I tell you, if you are planning to have online sessions with children, the children will adapt to this new mode much faster than you and I are struggling to adapt. Because one thing you're likely to tell is, I'm not able to feel the children, I'm not able to see everybody's expression, but it's just a question of opening up. They are much at home to a new way of reaching out. We will also upgrade ourselves so that we make ourselves available to children. Thank you so much. Over to you, Hardik.
Thank you very much, Shiv.